As the golden sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of amber and crimson, Mike Tyson drove down the quiet suburban street, feeling an unusual sense of peace. It had been a long, grueling day of training, but coming home to his daughter always made it worthwhile. His house, a cozy two-story home nestled among towering trees, stood as a sanctuary away from the chaos of his past life in the ring. Inside, 8-year-old Emily Tyson sat cross-legged on the living room floor, completely absorbed in her favorite cartoon, her beloved teddy bear clutched tightly in her arms. Her laughter echoed softly through the house, a gentle reminder of the innocence and joy that filled their lives. For Tyson, Emily was his world, his reason for pushing forward, for finding redemption beyond the fame and violence of his boxing career. He had built this life for her, a place where she could feel safe, loved, and carefree. The air was filled with the comforting aroma of dinner simmering on the stove, and the soft hum of the TV blended harmoniously with the peaceful sounds of the neighborhood. It was a perfect evening, one that seemed to stand still in time. But peace is fragile. As Tyson's car turned the final corner, a subtle tension crept into the atmosphere, almost imperceptible, like the calm before a storm. In the distance, a dark sedan crawled down the street, its headlights dimmed, moving with unsettling intent. It came to a stop a few houses away, and inside, a shadowy figure watched Tyson's home with cold, calculated eyes. Unbeknownst to Tyson, the tranquility he cherished was about to shatter, plunging him and his daughter into a nightmare from which there might be no escape. Inside the dark sedan, Officer Richard Kane sat motionless, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as he stared at Mike Tyson's house. The glow from a nearby street lamp barely illuminated his hardened face, but the anger burning in his eyes was unmistakable. Kane was no ordinary cop. He was notorious for his deep-seated hatred, particularly toward successful black men like Tyson. His envy had festered for years, fueled by his own failures and the twisted belief that men like Tyson didn't deserve their success. To him, Tyson's life, the fame, the fortune, and especially the loving bond with his daughter, was an insult, a reminder of everything Kane had lost. His jaw clenched as he watched Emily through the living room window, her tiny frame dancing playfully with her teddy bear, completely unaware of the danger lurking outside. Kane's grip tightened even further, his knuckles turning white. "You think you're untouchable, Tyson," he muttered under his breath. "But tonight, I'll take everything from you." The neighborhood was eerily silent, amplifying the darkness that clouded Kane's mind. He reached over to the passenger seat where a gas canister sat ominously, along with a box of matches. His plan wasn't just to hurt Tyson. It was to break him, to make him suffer the ultimate pain, losing the one person he loved most. Kane opened the car door quietly, stepping out into the shadows. His boots made no sound on the pavement as he moved with precision, like a predator stalking its prey. The faint flicker of Emily's cartoon still glowed through the window as Kane approached the house, his heart racing, not from fear, but from the thrill of destruction. A storm was coming, and Kane was its architect. Officer Richard Kane moved through the shadows like a phantom, the gas canister in his gloved hand sloshing with every careful step. His heart pounded in his chest, not from fear or hesitation, but from the adrenaline rush that came with knowing he was about to destroy someone's life. He crouched low beneath the living room window, peeking inside just long enough to see Emily twirling around, her teddy bear in hand, giggling at her favorite cartoon. The sight twisted something dark inside him, pure, unfiltered hatred. "Let's see how tough you really are, Tyson," he whispered, unscrewing the cap of the gas canister. The strong, acrid smell of gasoline filled the cool night air as he poured it along the house's foundation, splashing it onto the wooden porch steps and the front door. Each splash felt like a nail in Tyson's coffin, the culmination of Kane's years of envy and bitterness. The gasoline soaked into the wood, leaving a dark, wet trail of destruction. Once the canister was empty, Kane pulled a matchbox from his pocket. He struck a match against the rough strip, the flame flickering to life, illuminating his face with a sinister glow. For a brief moment, he hesitated. Not out of mercy, but to savor the moment. "Say goodbye, Tyson," he sneered, before dropping the match onto the gasoline-soaked ground. The fire roared to life instantly, flames racing along the gasoline trail, climbing the walls of the house like serpents. Within seconds, the front of the house was ablaze, windows shattering as the heat intensified. Kane took a step back, his face lit by the inferno, and smiled. A cruel, twisted grin. The flames danced wildly, their crackling roar drowning out Emily's innocent laughter, now replaced by her terrified screams. Inside the house, Emily's world shifted from playful joy to pure terror in an instant. One moment, she was laughing at her favorite cartoon, her teddy bear clutched tightly to her chest, and the next, thick black smoke began seeping through the cracks of the living room door. At first, she didn't understand. The acrid smell of burning wood filled her nose, and the flickering orange glow cast strange, dancing shadows on the walls. Then came the sound. The terrifying crackle of flames devouring her home. Emily's tiny body froze in fear, her wide eyes darting around as the reality sank in. She coughed, covering her mouth with her hands as smoke filled the room. The fire alarm blared, its shrill screech cutting through the chaos, but Emily could barely hear it over the pounding of her own heartbeat. Panic surged as she ran toward the front door, grabbing the handle, only to scream in agony as the scorching metal burned her hand. Tears streamed down her soot-covered face as she stumbled backward, her teddy bear slipping from her grasp. "Daddy, help me!" she screamed, her small voice cracking in fear. She turned and ran toward the living room window, slamming her tiny fists against the glass, hoping someone, anyone, would hear her cries. But outside the window, standing just beyond the flames, she saw him. Officer Kane stood there, arms crossed, watching her with a cold, heartless smirk. His eyes met hers, and Emily froze, realizing that this man wasn't there to help. He was the reason she was trapped. Kane lifted his hand and mockingly waved at her, his cruel smile growing wider as the flames crept closer, surrounding Emily in a fiery prison. As Mike Tyson turned the corner onto his street, the peaceful evening shattered in an instant. Thick plumes of black smoke billowed into the sky, blotting out the sunset like an ominous warning. His heart dropped into his stomach as he recognized the source. His house. The place he had built as a safe haven for Emily was now engulfed in flames, fiery tongues licking at the windows, the roof already caving in under the heat. Without a second thought, Tyson slammed the brakes, his car screeching to a halt in the middle of the road. He flung the door open and sprinted towards the house, his chest tightening with panic. "Emily!" he roared, his voice raw with terror. Through the chaos, he heard it, faint but unmistakable, his daughter's desperate screams for help. The sound pierced him deeper than any punch ever had in the ring. His baby girl was trapped inside. Tyson's eyes scanned the burning house, and that's when he saw her. Emily's small face pressed against the living room window, her tiny fists banging against the glass. Smoke swirled around her, and her terrified eyes locked onto his. "Daddy, help me!" she cried, coughing violently between screams. For a split second, time stood still. Tyson's world shrank down to that window, to Emily's pleading face. He felt the unbearable weight of fear and helplessness, but it only fueled his resolve. There was no choice, no hesitation. "I'm coming, baby," he bellowed, surging forward toward the inferno. The heat was overwhelming, like stepping into the core of a furnace, but Tyson didn't care. Every instinct in his body screamed for him to save his daughter, no matter the cost. Mike Tyson didn't think. He moved on pure instinct, his body propelled by the primal force of a father's love. The intense heat blasted against his skin as he charged toward the front door, flames crackling and roaring like a living beast. With a guttural roar, he lowered his shoulder and slammed into the door with all his might. Wood splintered and cracked under the sheer force of his weight, but it didn't give. Tyson took a step back and threw his entire strength into one more devastating hit. This time, the door burst open, releasing a surge of flames and smoke that billowed out like a violent breath. The suffocating heat inside was nearly unbearable. Smoke swirled around him, thick and choking, but Tyson powered through, his eyes burning as he scanned the room. Every breath scorched his lungs, but he could still hear Emily's faint cries. "Daddy, I'm here!" Her voice echoed through the smoke. Following the sound, Tyson charged into the living room, where the ceiling beams crackled above, threatening to collapse. Amid the haze, he spotted her. Emily crouched behind the couch, her tiny arms wrapped around her knees, tears streaming down her soot-streaked face. Without hesitation, Tyson lunged forward, scooping her into his arms. She clung to him desperately, coughing and gasping for air. "Hold on tight, baby. I've got you," Tyson whispered, though his voice trembled with fear and exhaustion. With Emily in his arms, Tyson turned back toward the broken front door, but the fire had spread faster than he expected, cutting off their path. He glanced toward a nearby window, now cracked from the heat. Gritting his teeth, Tyson ran toward it, bracing himself for the final escape through the flames. With Emily clinging tightly to his chest, Mike Tyson charged toward the cracked living room window, flames licking at his heels. The intense heat seared his skin, but he refused to slow down. Emily coughed violently, burying her face into his shoulder as he shielded her from falling embers. Tyson knew their time was running out. The house groaned under the weight of the fire, the structure threatening to collapse at any moment. Reaching the window, Tyson used his elbow to smash through the weakened glass, shards scattering across the scorched floor. Without hesitating, he wrapped Emily tighter in his arms, shielding her completely, and leaped through the opening. They tumbled onto the front lawn, landing hard on the grass. Tyson gasped for air, his chest burning, but relief washed over him as Emily coughed and sobbed, alive and safe. But before he could catch his breath, a low, mocking clap echoed through the smoke-filled yard. Tyson turned his head and saw Officer Richard Kane standing a few feet away, his gun drawn, a twisted smile on his face. "Well, look who made it out," Kane sneered, aiming the weapon directly at Tyson. "But this is where it ends." Tyson's heart raced, not from fear for himself, but for Emily, who still clung to him. He slowly rose to his feet, positioning his body between Kane and his daughter. "You don't have to do this," Tyson growled, his fists clenched, his eyes burning with rage. But Kane laughed coldly. "Oh, I want to." The tension in the air was electric. Tyson, unarmed but fueled by pure adrenaline and a father's fury, stared down the man who had nearly taken everything from him. It was about to come to a brutal, inevitable clash. Mike Tyson's eyes locked onto Officer Kane, his body trembling with rage. Emily clung tightly to his leg, sobbing, but Tyson's focus was entirely on the man who had tried to take his daughter's life. Kane kept the gun aimed squarely at Tyson's chest, his finger hovering over the trigger, a sick smile still plastered across his face. "Step aside, Tyson," Kane snarled. "You got her out, but that doesn't mean you both walk away." But Tyson wasn't moving, his fists clenched, his muscles tense, every ounce of his being burning with fury. "You're not touching her," he growled through gritted teeth. Kane laughed, a hollow, menacing sound. "You think you can stop a bullet, champ?" Tyson's heart pounded, but his mind raced faster. He scanned the ground, looking for anything, an opening, a weakness. Then Kane's hand twitched, just enough as if preparing to fire. That was the moment Tyson needed. With lightning speed, Tyson shoved Emily behind him and lunged forward. Kane fired, but Tyson twisted midair, the bullet grazing his shoulder instead of hitting his chest. Ignoring the searing pain, Tyson closed the distance in an instant and slammed into Kane with the force of a freight train, knocking the gun from his hand. Kane staggered backward, but Tyson was relentless. Fueled by rage and the raw instinct to protect, Tyson's fists became a blur, landing crushing blow after crushing blow. Each punch carried the weight of his fear, his love for Emily, and his absolute fury. Kane tried to fight back, but he was no match. Finally, with one devastating uppercut, Tyson sent Kane flying backward, his body slamming into the patrol car with a sickening crunch. Kane crumpled to the ground, unconscious, bloodied, and broken. Tyson stood over him, chest heaving, victorious, but not out of pride. It was the primal victory of a father who would go to any length to protect his child. As Mike Tyson stood over the battered, unconscious body of Officer Kane, his chest heaving with exhaustion and adrenaline, the distant wail of sirens pierced the smoky night air. Tyson's fists trembled, blood dripping from his knuckles, but his focus snapped back to Emily, who sat a few feet away, curled into a ball, clutching her teddy bear. Her wide, tear-streaked eyes met his, filled with fear but also immense relief. Tyson rushed over, scooping her into his arms, holding her tightly as if he'd never let go again. "Daddy, you saved me," Emily whispered, her tiny hands gripping his shirt. "I'll always save you," Tyson replied hoarsely, tears welling in his eyes. The blaring sirens grew louder until several police cruisers and fire trucks arrived on the scene. Firefighters immediately rushed to the burning house, dousing the towering flames with powerful streams of water. Thick steam rose into the air as the inferno was slowly subdued. Meanwhile, armed officers jumped out of their vehicles, guns drawn, pointing at Tyson. "Hands where I can see them," one officer barked. Tyson stood up slowly, still holding Emily, and raised one hand in surrender. "I'm not the enemy," he said firmly. Then, another voice broke through the chaos. A senior officer, Captain Harris, emerged from behind the patrol cars. "Stand down," Harris ordered his men, lowering his weapon. He approached Tyson, eyeing the unconscious Kane sprawled near the dented patrol car. "We've been building a case against Kane for months," Harris revealed. "We knew he was dangerous, but this?" He shook his head in disbelief, staring at the wreckage. Tyson, still cradling Emily, spoke through gritted teeth. "He tried to kill my daughter." Harris nodded grimly. "He'll never hurt anyone again. You did what you had to do." With Officer Kane finally subdued and the sirens fading into the background, the adrenaline that had carried Mike Tyson through the chaos began to wane. Exhaustion hit him like a freight train, but the warmth of Emily in his arms grounded him. Her tiny hands still clung to his shirt, her body trembling, but she was safe, alive. That was all that mattered. Tyson slowly lowered himself onto the grass, pulling Emily onto his lap. Her tear-streaked face buried into his chest, muffling soft sobs. He stroked her soot-covered hair, feeling the rise and fall of her shaky breaths. "You're okay now, baby," he whispered, his own voice cracking with emotion. "Daddy's got you." Emily tilted her head up, her big eyes glistening. "I was so scared, Daddy," she said, her voice trembling. I thought you wouldn't get there in time." Tyson's heart clenched. "I will always get there in time," he promised, placing a gentle kiss on her forehead. "Nothing, and I mean nothing, will ever stop me from protecting you." The firefighters moved around them, extinguishing the last of the flames, but for Tyson, the world had gone quiet. It was just him and Emily. The horror of the night was still sinking in, but in this moment, they had each other. Captain Harris approached again, a softer expression on his face. "We'll get you both checked out at the hospital," he said, "and we'll make sure Kane pays for everything." Tyson nodded, but his focus remained on Emily. She was the reason he had fought through fire, through bullets, through death itself. Holding her tightly, he whispered, "We're safe now, Emily. I promise."